Welcome to Buffeting, the podcast where my wife Kass
Ew.
and I share our conversations on investing with you as we try to keep compounding capital so I don't have to go back to being a carpenter.
And I don't have to go back working with real estate agents. We hope you find it informative and entertaining.
But we are not your financial advisors and nothing we say should be taken as investment advice. As always, do your own research, which is more fun.
And now, without further ado, on to the episode. We are like cavemen with stone tools over here, people.
And anything that you think is likely to happen, but the market thinks is not likely to happen, that's an edge and that's something that you need to work with.
Drinking your Coke, eating your peanut brittle, getting your buffing on.
I literally had Coke and peanut butter, didn't I?
You
I was
still
like,
do.
maybe it'll help. Let's make this next, however long this one's going to go for, talking about our story of what we did last March when the virus hit.
Because that's kind of like, that is the very beginning of our investing together.
Yeah.
And I feel like me coming on board with you finally, it has changed the way you invest. And also having like the female male thing coming into it. I don't know, I'm very on board with Jen Ross here in the way that, you know, she's a shorter and she worked in a firm of females who were shorters.
Yeah.
It is kind of my bias as well. I don't know if that's the female approach.
When you say you're biased, what do you mean? Like
I'm negatively biased towards everything we look at. You know, if like I look at online fashion retailers and like candle companies and beauty companies, and as a female, like you'd think that I'd look at those and just get seduced by the business. You know, you just kind of, but I look at it and I look at their financials and I think about their future prospects and the moat that they have, and I'm always on the negative slant. I'm like, how on earth do they have something unique here? Whenever we look at anything, I'm kind of like, let's short it. Aren't I?
which would have worked out great if the last, for the last year, probably that would have been, a bad strategy. But even if you were correct, but that's the thing about investing is you can be correct, but it might take 3 or 4 years for you to be proven right. And we're fortunate in then what we did in the last March. It was one of the only times I've ever heard about where you could take a short position against something, and the time frame was pretty clear. But that's jumping ahead a little bit. I think we should just I think
Let's get back to the start.
Yeah. So what happened so I'd already been investing with our large chunk of capital that we got from selling our house for about 3 years. Hadn't done that great.
Is that the start? I guess that's the investing start.
Yeah, that's the start of that part of our life where we were taking it more and more seriously.
Yeah, I guess our backgrounds, just to go over this quickly, because like we've come from absolutely nothing. You were a carpenter apprentice. I was in real estate doing my certificate, like admin real estate. We had a negative NAV.
Yeah. Negative NTA. Negative book value.
Exactly. Anyway, we ground through, kind of churned through, got ourselves to like net level 0.
Yep.
And then from there, bought a house, renovated it, sold it, had a little pool of capital. And during that time, you'd been reading about investing. You'd read probably 100 books.
I probably invested about 30 grand at that point and was starting to get used to, or starting to feel pretty comfortable about, like my abilities to handle ups and downs, to understand businesses and that kind of thing. And I think I'd made about 15% or I think it was 17% per year for the first 3 years before we sold the house.
Yeah, with like a tiny amount.
Amount. So like, okay, all signals point to yes, and I feel like we both felt like I was the right kind of person, like personality wise, suited to it, which is a big part of it because there are certain
delve into that. But that's a massive part of investing.
There are certain personality traits. Are you emotionally stable? Do you get upset when you feel like you've lost money? Does it really ruin it for you, or are you able to take the loss and move on? Because if you think you're going to be an investor and you're never going to lose money, then You know, it happens.
It's gonna happen.
It happens to everyone. It happens to the best of us, and that's part of taking risk, and that's why you don't put all your eggs in one basket, and you only just ever have, you know.
Yeah. And if the
your
thought
risk
of like
spread.
waking up tomorrow morning and your portfolio has halved in value, right? If that will devastate you, don't do investing.
Don't do it.
Like, yeah, you need to get your emotions right first.
Yeah.
That's crucial. Otherwise, you just will not stick it out the long term. And it is a long term thing.
Definitely. So we sold our house. You know, I was very passionate about it, and then I started doing screens, and I started, you know, really trying my guts out. Basically, I was only working 4 days a week, so I think I was committing some more time to it. I was doing Fridays and Saturdays, getting my little study, had my whiteboard. You know, I was writing everything down and
Drinking your Coke, eating your peanut brittle, getting your buffing on.
I literally had Coke and peanut butter, didn't I?
You
I
did.
was
You still
like,
do.
maybe it'll help. You never know. Like, who knows? But
Same fuel,
same fuel,
same output, hopefully.
Oh gosh. But yeah, it didn't go that great. It didn't go that great. It went, you know, it was adequate. I think by the time the start of 2020 happened, we'd compounded about 7% per year. I think the market had done about 12. So we're underperforming, but over a 3-year period of time is not long enough to tell if you're doing really well or not, in my
And you
opinion.
had just started learning.
Yeah, of course.
You just jumped headfirst into it. You learnt with real money. And I think that's crucial for people because you learn really big lessons at the start. And if you're doing that with a smaller pool of capital, then you learn the same lessons. It's just a reduced loss.
Yeah. If you think that you're going to be able to go from, you know, making money in a share market game to making money with a big slice of your net worth, and it's not going to be like that, because there's such responsibility knowing that if your capital gets lost, you don't have any more. You have to, you know, go back to work or something. Like, it can be very serious and daunting. So you have to have that approach to it.
Yeah, it's like Buffett's first rule, don't lose money. Buffett's second rule, don't forget rule 1. But we think people misinterpret that statement a little bit, right? He's not saying don't ever lose any money. He's saying don't lose all your money. You know,
Yes.
You're going to have to take a punt at stuff and you're going to have losses. That's okay. Learn how to emotionally deal with that.
Yeah.
But losing all your capital means that you've lost all your opportunity.
Yeah.
So,
You've got no more choices. You got to go back to working at McDonald's.
yeah. So be smart about it.
So we'd done okay, and I think probably I'd been a little bit too conservative. So I'd taken a number of big positions still, but they'd been in things that didn't have that same potential to grow. So I'd more gone for things that were your typical value investors stuff. You know, businesses that weren't doing well, that had some hard assets behind them, and that kind of gave me a feeling of security. But really, I've learnt that there's much more money to be made in businesses that are improving and growing, and, you know, good businesses, as Buffett talks about. So we're doing okay, pretty happy with, you know, 6 or 7%, whatever it was per year. I hadn't been taking what I thought was much risk, so that I was quite content with that. And then January comes along, 2020, and I just remember sitting here one morning and I opened up an article in the Financial Times, and there was an article about some virus in Wuhan that was spreading and was causing, you know, a lot of fatalities and stuff.
I think they'd only had about 300 cases or something at that point. It was tiny.
Yeah.
They hadn't even built the hospital or anything, which they did in a week. But yeah, this is the very beginning, the first kind of little news snippet about this virus that you picked up on that no one was talking about.
And I kind of had in my mind that pandemics were a big risk to be aware of. I'd read somewhere about the flu.
Well, we watched Bill Gates' TED Talk, and we were already kind of aware of the future risks for something to potentially happen.
So I started digging into that because we were about 80% invested at that point. So we had our stock, which means, to anybody in case listening, it means that of all the money that you have to invest, 80% of all that money was invested in the share market and 20% was in cash. So if we were going into a pandemic of some sort, we were very exposed to that risk. So the next month, so all through January and the start of February, was just us, both of us were convinced that this was the biggest risk that had ever happened in the last 5 years of us investing, in terms of one big thing that could disrupt every business, every industry, every country. And we've got messages from us, both of us, messaging multiple family members, trying to tell them, because at that point, it really looked like the death rate was between 1% and 2%. Now, we know now that it's come out to be like the 0.4, and, you know, you can argue about whether that's a little bit of immunity, or whether that's a bit of, you know, the hospitals have gotten better at treating it. But at the time, it looked like, based on what was happening in Wuhan, the death rate was 1%, and the transmissibility was high.
Yeah.
So we started digging into, you know, epidemiology, understanding. Every week we were just forcing ourselves, because the size of the risk seemed to dictate it.
Yeah. And also we're coming at it from the understanding that, well, the Chinese government's quite secretive. We don't know if we're getting all the facts. You know, they've just built a hospital in a week. That's a bit concerning. There's only like 3,000 cases, and they were already prepped to do that. So, you know, you've got to take all of this information on board.
Yeah.
Which luckily we did, but it was just like bizarre that no one else seemed to care.
And especially because the thing you want to look for, like, in investing, is what Monish Pabrai calls heads you win, tails you don't lose much. So you want to constantly take part in investments where the downside is capped and the upside is huge. And because the virus was spreading, it's basically compounding. You know, one person gets infected, they affect between 2 and 4 people, and then those people, you know, get infected, and they infect between 2. It's compounding. It's compounding. It's just compound interest. So if there's one thing we understand, it's compound interest. So yeah, we decided for the first time ever, and probably I would say, I'd be very surprised if this happened again, to sell our whole portfolio.
Yeah.
And
it's drastic. A drastic move.
A drastic move. Very kind of, it's the kind of thing you hear people doing. I don't know what they're doing. Most people don't recommend you do that kind of thing. I wouldn't recommend it.
No, I wouldn't recommend it. Looking back, I wouldn't have done the same thing. But we didn't know it was going to be a V recovery. Like,
no.
The way the market reacted only a month or two after the drop was mental. We were not prepared for that. But also, just to put it in perspective, at this point in time, you'd been investing for years and years and years with our money. And I was still working full time. You know, I was sleepwalking through life, I would say. And you were always talking about these interesting things, and I never took notice. I took them on board because now I can recall like all the companies you were talking about, and it's stuck in my brain, but I didn't process it and come up with my own thoughts or questions about anything. And so most investors are males.
Yeah.
Right. So I'd say to all the males out there, like, if you've tried to talk to your wife or partner about this and they're just not interested, just try a bit harder. Because if your partner can understand where investing can take you and how it can change your life and the control it gives you over your future, then, you know, you're going to have a partner next to you helping you decide.
Yeah. And
helping you through the whole process, because they're just as much invested in their future as you are in yours, because it's a future together. So yeah, what's come out of the virus is actually been quite amazing. You know, as much as you can say a positives come from that virus, but
well, it's made you realize how two individuals who are trying to understand the world, which is what we're trying to do as investors, like on a most basic level, you're trying to understand the world, can take the information that's freely available that everyone gets. You know, we don't have any inside information or anything, and take that information and make a decision that then enabled us to retire and do this full time together.
Yeah.
Only a few months later.
And wouldn't have had that if you hadn't started doing what you did 10 years ago. And if I didn't pay attention at that point and start taking a part. So yeah, I just say to any guys out there, just talk to your partner, because it is bloody interesting to a female's mind as well. What do you think the main trap that people get into when they're trying to have those conversations with their wife that they fall into? Do you think that a lot of men probably try and talk down to their partners about it? Like, do you think that that's what it is? You need to really explain it. Bobby, I really think a lot of guys don't fully understand the basics.
Right.
And so if their partner was to ask them a question about something, they're probably scared that they're not going to be able to answer it
Well, yeah.
in a simple enough, understandable way.
And
if that's your problem, you got to fix that first.
That's okay.
A problem.
That's above our pay grade if that's your problem.
But I get that sense talking to a few people that would be the reason. But if that's not the reason, maybe you just need to frame it in a way where your partner actually understands the possible end goal.
Yes,
right. If you sat me down and said, Bubby, I know you're not interested in all this investing stuff, but I just want to let you know that if we make this % return for the next few years, you can quit your job and work with me full time.
Yep. For
the rest of our lives, as long as our returns are keeping up with our cost of living, we can live off that pool of money, and there's your life sorted. So just to let you know, are you interested in investing now?
Yeah.
And I would have been like, fuck yeah. Anyway, back to it. So this is January 2020.
It's a good digression because it was a positive experience for us financially, but it definitely showed you that it can work. It showed you
it's real. It showed me it's real.
Yeah, it can be done. So what do we do is the question, right? So we sold everything. All our shares went straight to cash. Allocated a small amount of money to gold. The reason for that is just like they call it a hedge, kind of like an insurance policy is the way to explain it if you're not from an investing background. It's just to make sure that you've got money in cash, and then the gold is also a different kind of cash, basically.
Different storehold of wealth.
Exactly.
Should anything happen to the dollar.
Exactly. But then if we'd done that and nothing else, we wouldn't have even outperformed the market, really. The next step was, as the situation developed and the virus spread through Italy and Iran and
then made its way to
America. We were able to understand that these countries didn't have no cases. These countries weren't testing for cases, and there was no government mandates or anything.
No one was ready. No one was ready. And I think the biggest factor for us seeing the risks unfold was that there was like a 2-week period between someone catching the virus and producing symptoms. So we're thinking, okay, there is a chance that every country around the world is 2 weeks behind this virus, and there is no way to catch up. So we need to think quickly, how is that going to affect the economy? And unfortunately, how can we protect ourselves financially by making a return from it?
Exactly. And that's not because you want to try and make money off morbid things, but it's simply because it seemed at this point that it was likely to happen. And anything that you think is likely to happen, but the market thinks is not likely to happen,
that's an edge there.
That's an edge, and that's something that you need to work with. Yeah. So what we did was we took about 4% of our money, and we bought basically insurance contracts, which anyone can buy on any brokerage platform, Interactive Brokers or whatever you can, and we basically insured ourselves against the share prices of Flight Centre and Qantas going down, and we picked travel just because we thought that would be affected the most by like a worldwide pandemic. They'll shut the borders and
there's so many other things we could have done.
Oh my God.
That I look back at now, but we were just kind of rushing. I was brand new into it.
Yep.
Newborn baby into the world of investing.
Looking back, I didn't understand options anywhere near as well as I should have or could have.
We weren't even set up for it on an Interactive Brokers.
No.
We had to. Anyway.
That's the other thing, right? Remember we tried to buy options for the first time and it wasn't working.
Oh my goodness!
And then we had to get into ANZ at the time, who we were using. ANZ had to, go back and forth.
We're in Australia, which is like there's no investors around here. There's no one using any fancy databases or different platforms. Like we are like cavemen with stone tools over here, people. And I didn't know a thing about investing. And the first thing that we do is buy
weird insurance
put options,
put options contracts, against companies we don't even own shares in. So then what happened was the virus really started to spread pretty much as we thought it would. It spread to every country, and then I think it was the start of March that everyone started to freak out. Everyone started, because we still didn't know how fatal it was. We still didn't know if it could be stopped. No information about vaccines. This is, looking back now, everyone knows, oh yeah, we got vaccines. Well, the fastest vaccine that had ever been developed was like 5 years before this vaccine, So yeah, so we bought the insurance contracts, and over a 3-week period, those insurance contracts went from being worth 4% of our portfolio to producing a 66% gain, or about 15 times our money.
And that was in the space of a couple of weeks.
3 weeks. And I was getting the way the insurance contracts were is we could have chosen to sell them any day. So every night it would come through at about 9:30. These aren't traded, so you don't see the ups and downs of the share price. You just get a notification through an email. I've still got the emails.
Yeah, this is what it's worth now.
Saying like, oh, this is what it's worth, now. And the swings were like huge up, huge down. And somehow we held for 3 weeks through March. We held those insurance contracts because the situation was still getting worse. I had sort of decided in my mind that the best way to work out when to sell them or to get rid of them, to cash in on the insurance, if you will, was to sort of wait until the share prices of the companies that I'd insured against had gone down to a point where I was ready to start buying them. And so Flight Centre and Qantas both went down, I think, 70% in 3 weeks. And fortunately, that was at the point where I said, okay, look, this is starting to look like I could handle buying some of this stuff. I didn't buy any of the stuff. I wish I had.
I know, me too.
If I just unloaded the insurance and then turned around and just bought those 2 stocks, it would have been insane. But at the time, the risk in doing that's the thing, right? Like, you want to be taking... I only took by selling the whole portfolio, I don't think we took much risk, really. Perhaps we were going to miss out on a month or two of returns.
At that point in time, we thought, okay, if the market crash does happen, it's going to be down for a long time. Therefore, we want that capital to play with because there's going to be so many opportunities of what to buy coming out of this. But we thought we'd have time.
Yeah.
We didn't realize that the drop was going to occur and then it was going to recover within a month or two.
Unprecedented.
Even me coming into it as a newbie, I was like, people, just psychology-wise, you've got a brand new virus killing people. It's spreading across the globe.
Yeah.
People are going to take their money and they're going to put it in their accounts or into gold, or like they're just going to go back to safety, and we're going to be stuck hibernating for years.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, but it's not what happened.
No. You had share prices going up or down on the day. The index up or down 8%, in one day, depending on whether the news was positive or negative. So the volatility, which is just, how much things go up and down, the volatility was incredible. But yeah, we sold out of the insurance, and then I think a week later the Fed came out and started to say that we're going to start pumping money into supporting some of these companies that have been damaged, the airlines and other industries, and we're not going to let them fail. Because the question up until that point was, okay, there's no one flying on planes. Is the government going to save these businesses? And it came out that they would. They decided they would save those businesses and they would help them out. And that started the recovery, which brought it all back. We did pretty well in the buying, so we managed to, I think...
You did well. I didn't realise at the time you were still deploying our capital to buy like Berkshire and
Howard Hughes.
These quality businesses that were now trading at a discount.
Yeah. I thought about it a lot. I thought about whether we should go more towards the risky side of things, maybe buy travel businesses or something.
I'm so glad you didn't.
Well, it would have worked out so good, but it's just the risk is there, right? Like,
there's kind of this real comfort in knowing that you make a transaction, you buy something, and you are able to hold that thing for decades.
Right.
You can go on a holiday for a year and not have access to your portfolio, and that'll be totally fine.
Yeah.
Because you've got something, you're holding on to something that is quality and is long dated.
Yeah.
But you did well still buying stocks during that period and selling out at the right time. I think there was a lot of luck involved, but you were bringing kind of your experience to it still. There's a lot we learnt from that, though.
I think what the main lesson for me was never rest on your laurels. So like when we had made the money from the insurance contracts, I don't think I adjusted fast enough to treat that pool of capital as our new
as our money.
Yeah, because you're used to a certain amount of money being 10% of your portfolio or 20% of your portfolio, and all of a sudden you've made a big chunk and you've got to readjust and you've got to be more aggressive, and that's quite hard to change that mindset. And obviously understanding what I now understand about call options and stuff, it would have made a lot of sense to just take 4 or 5% of the portfolio and just spread it across, some really out of the money, long dated call options, which again, for those people who don't understand that, basically for a small amount of money, usually between 5 and 10% of the value of the share price, you can have the right to buy shares at a set price for the next year. So why would you do that? Well, if you think the share price is going to go up a lot, you can commit 5 or 10% of the value of the share price to giving you the right to buy at a lower price. So if the share price does go up, you've got, you'll make 5 or 10 times your money, because then you can then take that 5%.
It does make sense. It's a bit complex, even for experienced investors. I think it seems to be another spot of like, too difficult or too risky, or it's not proper value investing or whatever. It's just a opportunity that you can take advantage of at certain points in time. And the beauty of it is that it requires less of your capital to put to work.
And the way that we do it, your downside's always capped. So just like when you buy insurance on your car, you can never have to pay more to get your car insured if you have an accident. Like, if your insurance premium is $1,000 and you have an accident, well, that insurance premium pays off like 30x. And if you think about it in like a purely financial terms, if your car's worth $30,000, your car crashes, you've got a $1,000 insurance policy, all of a sudden you're getting $30,000 of value for the paying $1,000. And you can do that in the stock market as well, both on the upside and the downside. So that would have been the way to do it, because then you're limiting the amount of money you can lose instead of actually committing your capital. Because I was straight away thinking in terms of, well, I've made all this money, how can I avoid losing it?
Yeah.
But look, all things being equal, it worked out pretty well. We ended up about 115% for the year, which is obviously fantastic. That was really great. Definitely, it was a huge opportunity, and we could have done a lot better if we'd
a lot better.
Know what we know now. But I think every investor, no matter how successful they are, would always say that.
Of course.
About every situation,
and
like you're trying to learn from it.
We'll know for next time. And next time might be different. See, this is the complexity with investing. The exact same scenario can happen with a totally different result.
Yeah. What would have happened if the government, let's say the government had been less pro-business and they'd been elected on a platform of not supporting Wall Street and big business? If the government waits another month, all the people who waited back in March and April are looking very silly all of a sudden. So you can't be too critical, but I think it's a lesson to be learned, that always be as aggressive as you can, no matter how well you've done in the past month or 2 months. An opportunity with low risk and high upside is always got to be grabbed with both hands.
Yeah. No matter the environment, I guess. Just be aware of big macro factors as much as you can, but they shouldn't dictate taking an action that makes sense in every other aspect.
Yeah.
So now we invest full time and we live off kind of 4% as our living costs.
Yeah. If we make better than 4% a year, we'll move forwards in our wealth. If we make less than that, we'll go backwards. But it's on us. It's like what Bill Brewster said. We eat what we catch. Mm-hmm. We eat what we kill in terms of investing.
Basically.
If you got this far, thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed the conversation.
Now, if you'd like to become my 22nd
or my 43rd
follower on Twitter, links are in the show notes below.